This is the start of another E46 M3 subframe repair and reinforcement process on the rear axle carrier at the back of the car. So the car is now stripped down, exhaust, prop shaft, heat shields, under trays, axle, fuel tank system out. We're just going to take those brake pipes out, and it's come in because we've got hairline crack on the left rear mount and spot weld failure, corrosion showing flecks of the spot welds, a couple of spot welds breaking in that corner arch of the rear axle carrier panel. That's the crack from the other side. And we've also got cracks on the front right mount as well. Spot weld breakage where the bush has been pushing into it, and then a crack going forward and a crack going back, and then vertical as well. So next up is degrease the panel. We degrease the underside of the rear axle carrier panel, a really important step so we can see and identify all the cracks and carry out the initial assessment report. It's no good doing it if we're looking at dirt like that, because things will get missed. So we've got a nice original E-coat colour on the rear axle carrier panel. We've got a semicircle crack around that front left mount and two spot welds showing signs of flex. Several cracks around the right front mount, spot weld breakage, and a couple of cracks out of that one, semicircle crack around that one, and a couple of spot welds showing signs of flex. These are just initial looks. We'll go into more detail next. That's the right rear mount, and although it looks in very good condition, there is a very small hairline crack on the corner edge in there, going up at a 2 o'clock angle. Left rear mounts, we've got the common hairline crack on the left rear, spot weld showing signs of movement on the vertical section, several underneath showing signs of decent. Also one at the very bottom side which is probably going to show a crack on the inside cavity, which we're going to go and check with a borescope camera next. Possibly a bit of flex on those chassis leg spot welds there. Definite two failures up here, and also that's proved by the splits in the seam sealer on the side of the connection to the wheel arch panel. Definite spot weld where the floor is dropping off of the chassis leg inside the car. That one's already gone, and there will be one around the left hand side underneath that seam sealer once we start removing some. And we've also got another crack on the top section around in the top front section. That's where the panel is held with three panels all held together with a spot weld to the chassis leg and the rear seat panel, so that will also need some investigation inside the car as well. The interior is removed now because obviously it's a big risk where we're welding is directly underneath the panel, so we have to take a lot of items out, and that gives us a chance to look at the top of the rear axle carrier panel, which has got this sound deadening pad on it. And we can see that there is a drop of the rear axle carrier panel away from the chassis leg. There's a very slight split in the seam sealer around about the centre of the picture now, and that means that the spot weld we know underneath the car is broken, and therefore the panel is trying to drop away or pull away from this chassis leg here. So we do need to take off some of this sound deadening pad, then the seam sealer, work out how much of a drop's there if the floor needs moving up in any way, and then stitch weld in the rear axle carrier panel to the chassis legs. The borescope camera checking the internal cavity, the left rear cavity. We've already had a look at the bottom section. The bottom section looks very clean and clear. And now we're in the top left, live movement, and we've got a strengthening rib, which is those horizontal lines going towards the front of the car, and that is lapped over a piece of the rear axle carrier panel internally, and there's a spot weld which has got nearly, well, just over half crack all the way around, which is that black movement, that line. So we're not going to be able to access that from underneath the car, so we are going to need to take a section of this boot cover out, and then we can access it, repair it, strengthen it, and weld this cover back in place. Some of the sound deadening pads are removed now, both sides, on the left and the right. So earlier on we had a section that's showing drop in that area there. And the reason why we opened up this left rear panel is because we've got a spot weld failed which we didn't have any access to. This piece here, very slight, you saw it on the video earlier, if I can get the camera in the right light, The black line around it is a spot weld that's failed over half the circumference of the circle. It's a 3-panel connection, and it's one that we just can't get to underneath the car, so it has to be opened up inside. And it also gives us a chance to check out these lower edge spot welds, which are also problematic. So far those are okay, so it's just that one up there that we're going to do on the back left corner. Then if we go inside the car, we've also found internal crack problems in the back seat, in beneath the seat panel area. This is where we access the front mounts. The rear subframe front mounts are MIG welded to a sheet panel. These are the 2 MIG welds you're looking at here. There's a very small hairline crack going across the top of that one, we think, and there's definite clear breakage and cracks on this one here, which need to be stopped, because there's no point having reinforcement plates underneath the car if this is going to be left hidden inside the cavity to then grow in the future. We've got a very small one on these small MIG welds on the left hand side, crack at the bottom of the picture there, and a crack at the top of that MIG weld. This one appears okay at the moment, so we're going to repair all these internal cavity cracks as well as the underneath of the car as well. We've identified all the crack problems and spot weld failures and removed the paint and seam sealer in the areas that we need to be weld repairing the cracks and also reinforcing. So we've taken a section out around that front left mount so we can gain access to the platform behind and reinforce the connection points to it, and at the same time repair the crack that was around that section. Similar on the right front, we had a semicircle crack around the mounting point, which we've identified and removed a channel of material so we can get into the platform behind. And then we've got the crack dead-ended with a stop drill at both ends of it. Other little spot weld failures up on the floor of the car. Another one up on the left. Another one up directly above our heads on the top. And we've got the right rear plate, very small hole, crack identified in the corner. And then the left rear plate just had the usual crack at that section. 2 spot welds failed, which we've removed the material on this side of the panel, and then we can carry out our plug weld method and repair all these cracks and spot welds right now. The broken spot welds and the cracks have now been weld repaired and flush backed. We're just doing a final clean pass on the reinforcement plate areas so that we can come along and put a weld through primer on them and get ready to reinforce this rear axle carrier panel. That's the weld through primer on the back of the reinforcement plates. Really important stage, so that we know there's no bare metal trapped once these are welded on. And same with the car, it's just been applied, so that's drying now. Might put an infrared light on that to help that cure. And then we've also going to be really clever and improve the repair. We drilled out this spot weld which had a crack around it all the way through. Because we've got the section open inside the boot, we can make a 3-layer connection with a plug weld. Once the reinforcement plates are on, go inside the boot and plug weld, start the penetration on the plate, which would be here, then puddle it into the rear axle carrier panel and then into the other piece, the structural cover panel underneath the boot. The underside of the car has had etch primer now on the bare metal components after all the reinforcement work's done. We've got penetration marks here where we've done our stitch welding for the chassis leg to the rear axle carrier panel. And the etch primer is dried overnight, and then we've just done a high build primer, which is this black colour. It's got a red hue because we're running the infrared light at this time of year just to help the curing process. It's a bit dark there, but that's without the infrared light. So that's a high build primer just before the seam sealer stage is going to go on, and that's done and blended out into the wheel arches. We've got the new shaped arch here where we've done our stitch welding and plug welding, and that's pretty much dry now, so we're ready for the next stage, which is the seam sealer. Seam sealer was applied earlier, now we've just done coat of like a olive green, which is like sort of our version of the E coat, what they look like from factory. It's obviously got a red hue because we've got the infrared lamp on that drying, but that is everything painted, no sections missed, nothing painted over. We don't paint over brake pipes or clips or any plastics, wiring. It's just all taken off with professional paint methods. Once this is cured overnight, then that's going to be really solid and durable. You can jet wash that, you won't have any problems. It'll look fairly original once it's got a little bit of dirt sort of stuck to it and blended in. And then we'll come back to that and show you what it looks like in the daylight. That's had overnight to cure with infrared lamps, and that's the olive green match that we've tried to replicate the standard E-coat colour when they come from the factory dipped. So it does give fairly nice sheen. It's probably sort of a satin finish, I'd say. Left rear plate, right rear plate, start that again. Left front plate, right front plate, right rear plate, and left rear plate. And you also just see some stitch marks, penetration marks where we did the stitch welding inside the cabin, and then we've reshaped and repaired that arch section there. Just need to touch up this one little hole up there. So it's had new plug welds replaced and stitch welded all the way down and then reshaped. Taken off the loose corrosion off of the brake pipe brackets and fuel tank strap brackets and these handbrake cable carriers, and anywhere against that front edge where the rear axle carrier panel meets the seat panel. Blended up in towards the trailing arm pockets. So all edges are sealed. No corrosion left on there, and we've got a natural blend going out into the wheel arch. And that's ready to start cavity waxing through the holes behind the plates and up inside the boot and behind the rear seat area, so that we know all the cavities are clear, and then we can start rebuilding. So once we finish the internal cabin work, the car's looking pretty bare inside. We've done our welding reinforcement or cover plates on the front section where we had to access the front internal mounts, and then some of the back, and stitch welding down the side to hold the rear axle carrier panel to the chassis leg on the left hand side. So then the car looks pretty bare. Obviously we can't hand it back like that, so this is why we charge an hour's labour for all the prep work included in the removal of the sound deadening pads, the cleaning, the panel wiping, the vacuuming, the process of the masking and protecting the rest of the interior, because now we're going to have to do a 3-stage layer protection. Etch primer on the bare metal, high build primer to give it some thickness, and then there'll be seam sealer to fill the edges in, and then also the body colour paint, which in this case is going to be Titan Silver. And then on top of that there will be then a new sound deadening pad which is applied, and then it takes around about 20 minutes to heat that up and press it into all the shapes of the contours of the rear axle carrier panel, and then we'll show you what that looks like once finished shortly, and that then goes back in a fairly OEM fashion, so it doesn't look like much work has happened inside the boot. That's the etch primer stage, and now just letting that dry naturally under infrared light. High build primer stage has been applied and cured under infrared lights, and then we're partway through the prep, masking the car up for the internal spray. Most of the interior has been removed, but any items that aren't are protected and covered up. Brown paper and bags and things like that, and then we're ready to do the seam sealer process. Seam sealer was applied earlier to give a textured finish, and a top colour which is Titan Silver. We've tried to, it's just gone on, so it may dry a little bit different. We've done a blend into the edge of the boot chassis legs, which hopefully won't show too much once the polystyrene item's in there. So fairly nice textured finish, and now we're just going to let that cure on infrared light. Time for the new sound pad to go on. This is genuine BMW sound pad that will be glued back in on top of the rear axle carrier panel now that it's painted. We've now spent time to put the sound pad back onto the top of the rear axle carrier panel. So the sound pad is this sticky black bitumen item that we've heated up and pressed into all the contours of the floor. And now we've started putting the seat belts on into the holes in the rear axle carrier panel, the seat bracket, ISOFIX 4 mounting points down here, and some of the boot carpets as well, and the sound insulation pad for the fuel tank under the lower seats. And you can just make out the cover plates that we've welded on, which we needed to gain access to the original problem of the cracks inside the cavity. So it's looking very nice, if we do say so ourselves. You can see the silver textured finish of the floor paint underneath, and then the sound pad sort of highlighting a good contrast and showing something is happening in this area. Nice fresh new materials. We walk round to the boot. We're still in the middle of putting things back together, but that gives you an idea of the finish. Textured pad here, our silver textured paint spray here, and you can see the panel edge that we've done. So in a way, we don't want to hide it completely, because we want to show that something has happened. We want people to realise that if the car is sold or something's happened, yes, this has been cut open. It's obviously to repair. A thorough subframe repair has happened internally as well as underneath the car. And then we've put all new grommets back into the holes, the 10s, the 20s and 10s, and even the 20mm. This is what BMW call the melded ring. It's a melted one which we heat up, and the material, the yellow material, melts and it seals nicely. That's just making them back as original as possible. We've obviously extensively cavity waxed from underneath the car and now inside. You can just see some liquid in there, which is the cavity wax, which will now start curing over the next 24 hours. And then that allows us to put the last 20mm bung into the original place. The blend is not too bad. Silver to original silver is roughly about here. The blend line was there and roughly there. There's still more trims and plastics and fixings and grommets to put back in, but once the other sound pad is, the carpet is on that one, then the hardboard, and then the final carpet, there really is nothing that's going to show you that it sort of opened up unless you start lifting the trim panels off. And then when you do, hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised that it is to a nice original factory finish. All the rear seats are fitted now back in their original position, proving everything lines up and no changes have happened to the structure itself. That's what it looks like with the hardboard floor lifted. And naturally all the boot trims and carpets fit and the seats as they should. So looking at it, you can use it as a normal car, no changes, just structurally reinforced internally. The subframe repair and reinforcement process is finished on this E46 M3. You can see the outline of the left rear plate there, and the right rear plate above that bush. Right front plate is behind the fuel filler neck system, and left front plate might just be visible in the distance. We've carried out stitch welding and plug weld replacements of the broken spot welds on that left side lip just here, and shaped it just by the shock absorber, both sides. And we've done our extended paint and protection system all the way back past the rear silencer, blend up into the arch, both sides, and all the way at the front of the rear axle carrier panel, heading down towards the trailing arms up there. And then also, whilst the car was here, it obviously had a lot of extra welding work required for some of the spot welds that were failing up on the top section of the rear axle carrier panel. You can see some penetration weld marks where we've been welding inside the cabin, and it's penetrated through, which shows where we've stitch welded it to the chassis leg itself. And then it's had internal cavity work on the left rear mount and also on both front mounts behind the back seats. And then we've also done some extras that the customer wanted, so 4 new subframe bushes, brand new BMW genuine rubber subframe bushes, rear trailing arm bushes, both sides, which are the Powerflex brand. So a right rear brake pipe, nice new metal brake pipe, which has also been waxed with a transparent wax coat and joined in the original BMW joiner just on the top of the floor there. Right rear lower ball joint, this one was knocking, so new ball joint New camber arm because the camber eccentric bolt was all seized together in the sleeve, trapping the arm between the two components. Got rear top mounts, CSL rear top mounts on there as well, the upgraded ones. Right rear diff seal, just clean the old oil off, but that diff seal was done whilst we had the axle out. Rear brake discs, new genuine BMW 2-piece discs, and I think it's performance friction pads as well. And that was basically about it. That was all the extras that the cars had. We'd also done some exhaust work previously last year, so it had some replacement clamps there. I think it had a few rubbers on the back box, some welding studs for the reinforcement, for the heat shield plate there, and some center nuts and bolts last year, so that keeps the exhaust in good order. That's pretty much it mechanically. So I had a 14-mile road test, and now it's just going to be cleaned and ready to hand over to the customer. That's the subframe repair and reinforcement process finished now. 12-14 mile road test, everything's fine, and the car is now ready to go home.